Eva Dutton had spent years believing she was broken. At one of the most prestigious high schools in Washington, D.C., she was a girl everybody expected to fail. They saw the failed quizzes, the blank worksheets, the way she froze every time numbers appeared on the board. But sometimes one teacher, one moment of kindness, and one person refusing to give up on you can change the entire direction of a life. The teacher who finally noticed the pain behind her silence was about to change not only Eva's future, but the life of a father who had forgotten how to truly see his daughter. Benjamin Banneker Academy High School looked perfect from the outside. Tall brick buildings, ivy banners hanging above the entrance, college acceptance posters lining the hallways like trophies. Students walked through the doors carrying Starbucks cups, AirPods, and SAT prep books like they were already halfway to Harvard. But Eva Dutton knew better. She knew which classrooms made her chest tighten before she even stepped inside. She knew what it felt like to hear people whisper the word billionaire every time she failed another test. She knew that no matter how expensive the school was, no amount of money could stop someone from feeling completely alone. By 16, Eva had become an expert at pretending she didn't care. She sat in the back corner of Algebra 2 every morning with her hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands and her hair tied up in a mess of bun, hoping nobody would notice the panic behind her eyes. But panic is a way of showing itself anyway, especially when numbers are involved. She was staring at the smartboard one Monday morning when she heard her teacher begin reading test scores aloud. Eva didn't know that the next 30 seconds were going to follow her long after the bell rang, long after the whispers started. Long after one teacher quietly walked into her life and changed everything she thought she knew about herself. Before we go any further, there's something about stories like this that hits people personally. Because almost everybody remembers a moment when they felt invisible, and one person who made them feel seen again. If that's ever happened to you, then this story is probably going to stay with you. But before we continue, hit subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and which part of the story hit you the hardest. I believe this story found you today for a reason. Now let's continue. It was a cold Monday morning in Washington, D.C. Nothing about it looked unusual. Traffic crawled past Georgia Avenue. Students hurried through metal detectors near the school entrance while security guards waved them inside. The sky hung gray above the city, heavy with a kind of winter air that made everybody walk faster. Inside Benjamin Banneker Academy, the pressure never really stopped. College banners covered the walls. Conversations about GPA rankings floated through the hallways before first period had even started. Every student seemed to be competing for something: scholarships, internships, acceptance letters, validation. And inside room 214, Eva Dutton was already falling apart. She sat frozen at her desk staring at the equations covering the board. Crumpled papers surrounded her notebook. One failed test sat face up beside her elbow, a giant red F circle so hard it had nearly torn through the page. Around her, students scribbled answers confidently while calculator buttons clicked across the room like tiny ticking clocks counting down her embarrassment. Then the teacher reached her name. Eva Dutton, 4-2. The room went quiet for half a second. Then came the whispers. Her dad owns like half of D.C., somebody muttered softly, and she still can't pass algebra, another voice laughed. Eva lowered her head immediately, not because the words surprised her, because they didn't. Outside the classroom windows, Washington kept moving like normal. Cars rolled past storefronts. Sirens echoed somewhere in the distance. People crossed intersections carrying coffee cups and backpacks and groceries. But inside Eva's chest, something was collapsing all over again. That afternoon, the black Escalade was waiting outside the school exactly where it always waited. The driver opened the door. Inside, Matthew Dutton sat on another business call, his voice calm and sharp as he discussed mergers and investors without ever looking up from his phone. Only after several minutes did he notice the folded test paper in Eva's lap. "You need a tutor," he said flatly. Eva looked out the tinted window toward the fading D.C. skyline. "I need my dad," she whispered quietly enough that he never heard her. And neither of them knew that the woman about to walk into Eva's classroom the next morning was going to change both their lives forever. Miss Arlene Adams didn't enter room 214 like most teachers did. She wasn't loud. didn't slam books onto desks or start barking instructions before the bell finished ringing. She simply walked in carrying a coffee cup, a stack of folders, and the kind of calm that made people lower their voices without realizing why. Eva barely looked up. Another teacher, another adult waiting to be disappointed in her. 10 minutes into class, Miss Adams called Eva to the board. The room immediately tensed. Eva's stomach twisted as whispers started behind her. She stared at the equation, frozen. But instead of embarrassing her, Miss Adams quietly walked over and knelt beside her desk. "You're not afraid of math," she said softly. "You're afraid of what failure makes you feel." Eva looked up so fast it almost hurt. Nobody had ever said that before. Teachers usually saw laziness, defiance, attitude. Miss Adams saw fear. After school, she asked Eva to stay behind. At first, Eva expected tutoring drills and lectures. Instead, Miss Adams opened photos of Washington, D.C. landmarks on her laptop. The Kennedy Center, Howard University, metro station designs, Smithsonian architecture. Math lives inside patterns, she explained, and patterns tell stories. Weeks passed slowly, then differently. Miss Adams discovered Eva carried a sketchbook everywhere. Hidden between textbooks were detailed drawings of buildings, bridges, and city skylines. Perfect lines. Perfect symmetry. You see math visually, Miss Adams realized. That's your language. One evening, sunlight poured gold across the empty classroom windows while Eva stared down at another practice sheet. "Every time I get a problem wrong," she admitted quietly, "I hear people laughing." Miss Adams leaned back gently. "Then let's teach your brain a new voice. Some kids don't fail because they aren't smart. They fail because nobody ever stayed long enough to teach them gently. And if someone once did that for you, then you already understand why this mattered so much." The next quiz came back. 78. "Wait," a student whispered, stunned. "Eva's actually smart." Eva lowered her eyes quickly, hiding the tiny smile forming on her face. Then Miss Adams looked at her carefully and said, almost quietly enough to miss, "I knew your mother." Eva barely slept after hearing those 4 words. "I knew your mother." The next afternoon, Miss Adams took her to a small cafe near U Street, the kind with scratched wooden tables, jazz humming softly through speakers, and handwritten menu boards hanging crooked behind the counter. Outside, Washington moved like always. Buses groaning past intersections, students crossing streets with backpacks slung over one shoulder. But inside that cafe, Eva felt like the world had suddenly stopped. Miss Adams wrapped both hands around her coffee cup carefully. "I taught your mother before I ever taught you," she said gently. "She loved math, not because she cared about grades, because she believed patterns existed everywhere." Eva stared down at the table silently. She used to say math was proof the world still made sense. Something inside Eva cracked open. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. Miss Adams explained slowly what nobody else ever had. Trauma changes the brain. After the accident, Eva's mind connected numbers with loss, panic, and fear. Every equation became tied to grief she never processed. For the first time, Eva understood something life-changing. She never hated math. She hated pain. Across the city, Matthew Dutton sat inside the glass conference room of the STEM building he secretly funded for Benjamin Banneker Academy. He had convinced himself donations and scholarships were enough, until the school counselor looked him directly in the eye and said quietly, "Your daughter doesn't need another opportunity. She needs a father." The words followed him all night. Days later, Eva overheard administrators speaking outside the faculty office. "Miss Adams is too emotional. She spends too much time on struggling students. Parents want results, not charity projects." Then came the sentence that made Eva's stomach drop. They may not renew her contract next semester. After that, training for the National Math Championship became relentless. Whiteboards filled, coffee cups stacked. Panic attacks came and went. But every time fear returned, Miss Adams reminded her, confidence isn't never being afraid. It's staying when fear tells you to run. The night before the competition, Eva finally broke down. "I can't do this," she whispered. For once, it wasn't an assistant who entered her room. It was Matthew. Awkward silence filled the space between them before he finally said softly, "Your mother would already be proud of you." The National Math Championship filled the downtown Washington auditorium with pressure thick enough to feel in the air. Cameras lined the walls. School banners hung from the balcony rails. Students from elite academies across America sat beneath bright lights while live stream counters climbed online by the second. And at the center podium, Eva Dutton was trembling. The final problem appeared across the massive screen overhead. For one terrifying second, everything rushed back at once. Her mother's voice, screeching tires, the laughter from classrooms, failed tests crumpled in shaking hands. Eva froze. Then she heard Miss Adams' voice in her mind. Patterns tell stories. Slowly, Eva inhaled, picked up the marker, and began writing. The auditorium fell completely silent as she worked through the equation step by step. No panic, no rushing, just focus. When the final answer appeared correct on the screen, the room exploded into applause. But the biggest moment came afterward. Eva stepped toward the microphone unexpectedly, tears already filling her eyes as she searched the crowd for Miss Adams sitting quietly near the back row. "Everybody thinks this trophy means I finally became good at math," Eva said softly. "But that's not true. Miss Adams taught me I was never stupid to begin with." The room grew emotional immediately. "Some kids are drowning quietly inside classrooms every single day," she continued, voice breaking. "And sometimes all it takes is one adult who refuses to look away." Phones lifted everywhere. Teachers wiped tears from their eyes. Students stood clapping. By morning, the speech had spread across TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and national news stations all over America. The truth is, most people never forget the adult who helped them believe in themselves again. And stories like this matter because kindness remembered has a way of changing other lives too. Late that night, Eva sat on the rooftop terrace of their D.C. penthouse overlooking the glowing Capitol skyline when Matthew quietly joined her. No phone calls, no meetings, just silence and wind moving softly through the city. "I kept trying to buy you a future while ignoring your pain in the present," he admitted. Then finally, "I'm sorry I wasn't there." Eva leaned against his shoulder slowly. And for the first time since losing her mother, she felt safe again. Sometimes the people who change your life don't arrive loudly. They walk into ordinary classrooms carrying dry erase markers and tired coffee cups. Eva Dutton thought she hated math. But what she really hated was feeling alone. And one teacher changed that forever. If you love this story, don't just scroll away. Hit that subscribe button. Drop a like, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and which part of the story hit you the hardest. We've got more powerful, emotional stories coming your way, and trust me, you don't want to miss them.